Welcome back to First in Preparedness. This evening, we're going to be covering repairing a hunting rifle if it is not shooting accurately. Now, this particular rifle is a Marlin XS7 308. I purchased it back in 2013, because it was extremely inexpensive. It was only like $245 for it. So when I saw that, I quickly jumped at the opportunity. I received my rifle from my FFL and quickly went and got scope rings and mounted this Bushnell Trophy XLT scope to it. Excitedly, I went out to sight this rifle in, and I was less than impressed with the results. Basically, this rifle was shooting maybe 5 MOA at 100 yards. I mean, it was like maybe even more than 5 MO. It was probably 2 or 3 inch groups that I was getting out of it. To say the least, I was a bit disappointed. I went back and checked the rail, checked the rings, checked the scope mounts. Everything was tight. So at that point, I was like, maybe there's something wrong with the rifle. I did some digging around on the interwebs and found out that it had been theorized that where the stock meets the barrel, there are 2 pillars that basically interface with the barrel down here. And it's been theorized that those are messing with the barrel harmonics. Also, I saw several people saying you need to bed the action. Other people said, well, the stock is not stiff enough. So I decided to try all 3 solutions. I clearanced the barrel at the front. I basically installed a carbon fiber arrow shaft inside the stock through an interference fit and poured epoxy on it. I also then bedded the action in epoxy as well. Well, guess what? After that, rifle shot accurately. And the other thing that less than impressed me was the action itself. It was really, really gritty and basically almost had a detent as you started to close the bolt. So wasn't real impressed with that either. So I set out to repair this rifle. And now I'm going to cover kind of the steps that I did in each case. So going over the first procedure I performed on the rifle, the first thing I wanted to do was free float the barrel. There were 2 pillars here on either end of the stock that interfaced with the barrel. I took a Dremel tool with some sandpaper barrels and sanded those down first. I then took a 12mm socket and wrapped it in sandpaper and kind of ran it through this area until there was a little bit of clearance. If you notice, there is a long pole that sits down the inside of this stock. That is actually a carbon fiber arrow shaft that was cut down in order to kind of stiffen this whole front of the stock up. What I then did was cut it just to enough length that I could somewhat get an interference fit down the inside of this chamber here. I then poured epoxy on either end after roughing up the surface in order to get it to actually stick. After that, I then put 6 pieces of paper through here and I bolted the action back into the stock. What this basically did was put force on the front end of the stock to actually almost bend or kind of, I guess, distort the front of the stock enough that it would keep it off the barrel here. Moving on to the bedding process. Basically, the front lug up here had a ton of clearance. Now, typically that's not real desirable in a bolt action gun. So the first thing I had to do was tape the front of the bolt lug and then, of course, pour epoxy in all these areas here, mainly at the front and at the back. If you have those 2 areas bedded, that's basically bedding the action. You can kind of see a real small piece here or edge of the epoxy. And you can kind of see it around here at the back. So in order to do this, I obviously had to block off the magazine well and the trigger well, and of course the bolt rest. So what I had to do was basically fill this area in with modeling clay and then put a bunch of mold release wax onto the action in the barrel. We are continuing to repair this hunting rifle. As I spoke about earlier, there is this arrow shaft carbon fiber that I have epoxied down into here. Well, it's not the most symmetrical looking, so what I'm going to do is basically take a mill bit on a Dremel tool and try to make this a little bit more symmetrical, lighten it up a little bit, and hopefully keep all the structural rigidity into the stock of the rifle. So after a little bit of Dremel work with that mill bit, I rounded this out a little bit more. There were a couple of high spots in this area. I took out the unnecessary epoxy that was on the sides of the stock here and basically left kind of those 3 anchor points for the carbon fiber shaft that runs down here. So it's still well anchored in the stock itself. So that should still retain its stiffness, yet got rid of a little bit of weight, maybe cleaned it up a little bit, make it look a little bit better. So just shot some spray paint down there just to get it cleaned up. It looks like there's a little cavity down here that I need to do a little bit more work on, but it's a little bit lighter. So one problem that I did find with this bolt is it is extremely notchy when you go to close the action. So we're going to spend some time polishing this up using some real fine grit sandpaper on it. Basically going to start with 600 and then go to 1500 and see if we can polish that up a little bit, get the action a little bit smoother. That's it. You can already feel like the machine marks come out of it, even with that light bit of sanding. You can see there's not a tremendous amount of gray or fine metal dust coming off of my fingers, so it doesn't take a lot of pressure, just light pressure. Okay, now for the 1500 grit sandpaper. There is the 1500 grit. You can see a little bit more lines in the 600 grit area, but it is polishing up quite a bit. All right, so now you can see, I mean, it's getting to the point that it's almost polished. Now, I could probably stop now and not go to the polisher because, I mean, there's like no grit or any sort of grittiness to the bolt at all now. And that one's almost polished. So I've got this 600 grit lapping compound. It's basically for lapidary, I think, but we're just going to put it on just the back of the lugs, work the bolt back and forth, I don't know, probably 30, 40 times, clean it off and see if that has smoothed out some of this action. Here we go, just going to put a tiny, tiny bit. It doesn't take much. Little screwdriver here to distribute it. I only want to get it on the rear of that lug face. start to see just a little bit of polishing on the back side of the lug now. So I've ran it through probably, I don't know, 30 times. You can see the back side of the bolt is polished up. Haven't taken off much material, but you can definitely feel that there's no galling or any sort of hang-ups here. Now I'm going to take the bolt back apart and go ahead and finish polishing. There it is. It's not perfectly mirror finished, but polished up enough that I don't feel the grinding marks or anything else. It's smooth enough that it should help the action a little bit and hopefully have a decent rifle now that it's been repaired. Well, let's check out the result. Well, it's a lot smoother. It used to be there was almost a detent right about here where you close the bolt, and then it would go down. Now, I don't have to kind of hit and then put more force on it. It goes all the way down automatically now. So, after all that work, the firearm did shoot more accurately. The groups tightened up quite a bit, and I was pretty pleased with the result. So as you can see, I hit right here, which I'm pretty happy with at 100 yards. I'm going to be only shooting a deer at maybe 60 yards, so should be able to place the shot where I want to. Well, folks, here it is, the completed, repaired hunting rifle. Now, thank you for joining us here for Amateur Gunsmith Hour, and I will give you 2 pieces of advice should you decide to perform your own firearms gunsmithing or firearms repair. Those 2 pieces of advice would be 1, take your time, and 2, be patient. I speak from experience when I say I have screwed up several things myself. I am not a professional gunsmith, so I've learned, take your time and be patient. Go a little bit at a time. Don't be a bull in a china shop. With that, thank you for tuning in. And as always, if you are enjoying our content, please like and subscribe. And as always, hit the bell to be notified when we upload new videos.